welcome back to the Delo Studios. My name is Josh. Today we're going to talk about thinking like a business and not as a driver. Let's dive in. Let me ask you something. If you're an owner or operator right now, are you actually running a business or are you just driving your truck? Because honestly, those are two complete different things. Even though from the outside it looks the same, a lot of owner operators get into this industry thinking, well, I got my own truck now. I'm working for myself. I'm going to make more money. But then a few months go by, sometimes a year or two, and nothing really changes. They're still working long hours, still chasing loads, still dealing with the same problems. And at the end of the week, the numbers don't feel much better than they did when they were a company driver. So, what is actually going on? Why does some owner-operators stay stuck in that cycle for years, while others start thinking differently, making better decisions and actually growing? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. So, if you're new here, this is Trucking Explained. We talk about how things really work in trucking, especially for drivers who already know the basics but want to do things just a little bit smarter. Here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Owner-operators don't actually transition into thinking like business owners. They step into the ownership, but mentally, they still stay in the driver role. What changes is not the mindset, it's the responsibility. Now, there are truck payments, insurance, maintenance, fuel costs, and unexpected breakdowns, and a lot more pressure. But the way decisions are made often stay the same. They focus on the miles instead of the profit. They focus on staying busy instead of staying efficient. They take loads just to avoid sitting, even when those loads don't really move them forward financially. And this is more common than people think. If you look at industry data, you'll start to see that, according to the American Trucking Association, over 90% of trucking companies operate with 10 or fewer trucks, and the vast majority are very small operations. That tells you something. Very important, most businesses in trucking stay small, often running just one truck or a few trucks a year. Now, that doesn't mean that they're failing, but does show that growth is not automatic in this industry. Just owning a truck does not turn an operation into a growing business. On top of that, data from the OOIDA shows that owner-operators deal with tight margins. Median gross income might be around $150,000 to $180,000, but a large portion of that goes straight to expenses, with fuel alone taking close to 30% in many cases. So if decisions are based only on staying on loaded miles instead of protecting margins, it's very easy to stay busy but not actually build anything. And that's where the mindset becomes the real difference, because trucking will reward effort just enough to keep you going, but it will not reward you for thinking like a driver forever. At some point, if the mindset doesn't change, the results stop changing too. Let's look at the other side. What does it actually mean to think like a business as an owner-operator? Well, it starts with one simple shift. Instead of asking, how much can I make this week? You start asking, how much do I keep? That changes everything. Because once you start thinking that way, you stop chasing every load. You're gonna start evaluating them instead. You look at total miles, including your deadhead. You look at fuel costs for that route. You think about what happens after every single delivery, not just the current one that you're on. You're planning, not reacting. And according to the American Transportation Research Institute, the average cost per mile for operating a truck has been reported in recent years in the range of about $1.80 to over $2, depending on fuel and market conditions. So, if you're running loads at $2 per mile just to stay busy, you're not building a business, you're just covering expenses. A business mindset means understanding that not all revenue is good revenue. Some loads look good on paper, but when you break all of them down, they don't actually move you forward. So, why do some owner-operators succeed while others stay in the same place for years? Well, it usually comes down to a few key differences. First, they understand their numbers. They know their cost per mile, not roughly, not around, but clearly. They know what fuel is costing them weekly and monthly. They know how much downtime affects their income, and because of that, they make better decisions. Second, they protect their time. According to the FMCSA and industry estimates, drivers can lose anywhere from 10 to 20 hours per week just waiting at shippers, receivers, or between loads. Wow. So that's not just time, that's lost earning potential. Business-minded owner-operators look for ways to reduce that. They prioritize drop and hook loads when possible. They work with dispatch or systems that keep them moving. They avoid situations where they sit for half a day with no compensation. And third, they think long term. A driver mindset is focused on today or this week. A business mindset is focused on the month, the quarter, even the year. They're not just asking, did I stay busy? They're asking, did this week move me forward? One of the biggest traps in trucking is being busy but not profitable. And this is where a lot of owner-operators get stuck without even realizing it. You're running hard, putting in hours, covering the miles, but when you look at your bank account after expenses, it doesn't match the effort. Fuel, for example, can take 30 to 40% of your total operating cost, depending on the prices. So if you're running cheap freight just to stay moving, you're burning fuel without building profit. It feels productive, but it's not efficient. And over time, that definitely adds up. Months go by and you realize you've been working a lot, but not really getting ahead. That's not a work problem. That is a decision problem. The shift from driver to business owner doesn't happen when you buy a truck. It happens when you start thinking differently about your work. You stop reacting and start planning. You stop chasing miles and start protecting your profit. You stop focusing only on today and start thinking about where your operation is going. And the interesting part is you don't need more hours for that. You need better decisions. Two owner-operators can run similar miles, similar routes, even similar equipment, and end up in completely different financial situations just because of how they approach their work. That's the difference a mindset can make. At the end of the day, mindset is what separates someone who just works from someone who actually builds something. You can have the same truck, run the same lanes, even work the same hours as someone and still end up with completely different results. It's just because of how you think and the decisions you make. But the mindset alone isn't enough. Even if you start thinking like a business, you still need the right system around you. You need consistent loads, strong dispatch, clear communication, and support that actually helps you stay efficient instead of slowing you down. Because no matter how smart you are with your decisions, if the system you're working in is weak, it's going to limit you. That's why experienced owner-operators don't just look at rates. They look at who they are working with. If you're in a place where you feel like you're working a lot but not really moving forward, sometimes it's not just about changing how you think. It's also about changing the environment you're in. Here at Delo Trans, the goal is simple. Help drivers stay moving, reduce wasted time, and keep things structured so you can actually focus on making better decisions and running your operations like a business. If that's something you're looking for, reach out. We'll talk and see if it fits you. And if you've been in that situation before, working hard but not really getting ahead, drop a comment. I think a lot of drivers can relate to this. That's all the time we have today. I'll see you in the next Delo podcast. And as always, remember, stress less, drive less, earn more. Delo Trans.